Hello, welcome to The New Tradition. My name is Matthew Barnes. I'm a rising senior media arts production major at Emerson College. Behind me is Isaiah Campbell, a sophomore philosophy major at Liberty University. We're using this time to document our journey to creating a new framework through which to view the world. This show is a response to our shifting geopolitical and philosophical climate. We hope to better understand our world and the forces that play with it. Please enjoy.
Also dope, boy. Also dope, boy. Also dope, boy. Also dope.
All right, bro. How do you want to kick us off?
Dude, I don't even know. Okay, so to begin, basically, the way this all started was Isaiah and I met each other a few months ago, and we realized that we had we had some very similar concerns in common with each other about the state of philosophy and theology and all the ologies in the world, kind of. And so we decided, after months of deliberation and talking on the phone and not really remembering what we were talking about, that we needed to document our journey and kind of make something of it.
Right.
So to start off, I would like to give the audience kind of like a brief recap of what we've gone over so far. And I know brief is the wrong word to use because we've been talking for months now. But I would say, let's start with our mutual kind of agreement on what is wrong with our conceptions of, with our society's conceptions or culture's conceptions of kind of the way we interpret the Bible, and also the kind of like the theology of the American religion and all that.
Yeah, so I think a good place to start would be kind of asking the question or restating what I think probably will be the title for this episode, which is something along the lines of how to use philosophy to find God, right? So I go to Liberty University, very conservative, like Baptist, heavily like imbued with theology and all that. And a lot of the initial impression people get would be to, I guess, doubt my kind of subjective form of doubt. Like, basically, when you say something like, oh, I study philosophy or I read philosophy, the initial Christian reaction to that is something along the lines of like why do you need philosophy when you have God? And if you think about it, it's actually a really bad take. And I'm going to kind of go into that. So philosophy, like in itself, what I've been thinking about like the theory of it. And philosophy, for me, the way I kind of view it is it's pattern recognition, right? It's kind of testing out and seeing the patterns that are occurring in either thought or material world, and it's kind of systemizing it, and it's building a system upon it in which we can kind of predict our reaction or anything we have involving it. And it's kind of autistic. It's a really autistic way to view things because it becomes very box-like without some form of like big other to compare it to. And so I'm kind of struggling to find the words right now because I feel like I'm using like lingo that's like
That you don't want to use.
that I don't want to use. It's like second tier lingo. Because I haven't really explained the kind of concepts behind it. Ask me a question. I'm gonna look at my notes real quick.
let me just do this as well. So in this show, basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be saying kind of whatever comes to mind.
Stream of consciousness.
It's very much a stream of consciousness because we need to. What we're doing in this is not necessarily creating a new philosophy, but rather constructing a framework through which to view the world.
It's like basically what I'm trying to do, kind of my goal is identifying patterns and setting a North Star where to apply those set patterns. You know what I mean? Which goes into my belief that that like things like mysticism and symbolism are very very important way to view the world. And so actually behind me is a circle here, and I'm actually going to just jump into this
Okay,
because
shoot.
I think once I jump into it,
Yeah,
a
you
lot
got
of
it.
the other thoughts are going to flow naturally. So this is the Bohemian knot, something like that. And if you're Christian, which I'm hoping some of you are, because that's kind of the target audience here, is it has a very similar kind of like network as like the Trinity, right? So God, Father, Son, intersecting makes, Father, Son, Holy Spirit intersecting makes God.
Thanks, Jake.
Thank you, Jake. So we can let's just throw that on the board. Let's just try that out there. Don't mind the lowercase God. I'm not a heretic. Son, and then I'll put Sophia because I like it better.
Oh no, you didn't.
Yeah. So these things, all three things, all one thing, blah 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 blah. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to help you identify with kind of the framework of our minds by giving you an example through this process.
Okay, go.
The philosophy I'm going to use to supplement that is another person who uses, the kind of how this kind of symbolism got really big is Lacan, the French psychoanalyst, and he uses it to find the object of desire, the objet petit a, to be brief. Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
So are you trying to deconstruct a current framework that people are looking through, or are you doing something else? Right?
So right now I'm actually not negating anything.
Okay, cool.
So if you want to help
No,
me
go ahead.
find some things to negate, but I'm kind of trying to improve clarity on certain subjects.
Yeah.
So I guess one of my starting theses would be that the way we interact with God nowadays is heavily subjected by our current culture, specifically the American frame of mind, which has its influence by other cultures. And the thing is, we view history now as just kind of a series of isolated events, but everything is contextual. And that context, that matrix, what surrounds the rock that surrounds the gems, is we can use that kind of context to inform ourselves of our current state of mind and why it is wrong. Because usually what we're thinking about is pretty wrong when we don't have the right direction to direct those thoughts. So Lacan has the actually I can kind of apply these different things to different things. Let me think for a second. Let's go sun, reality. So Sophia, I'm probably gonna
You keep
say,
going. I just gotta check something real quick.
yeah, imaginary. And then God as the symbols or symbol. And then let's just put what's the like four-letter thing where it's like the thing of Yahweh by Libby.
Oh,
it's like-
YWHY.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That does not look right, but whatever. We'll let it. Why? We'll let it slide.
Yep.
So basically, this is how I try to pursue God in a sense. I've realized that a lot of the ways I was interacting with God is wrong, and you can kind of just see that in the current culture. The current Protestant state of mind, and you can track this across the denominations, it's basically the state of mind that the ancient Athenians kind of got to once their culture degenerated, which is sophistry, I don't know. Anyway, it's just sophistry is just like debating things and
For the sake of
debating things.
Yeah.
Nothing really has, because that's what happens when nothing has any meaning and hasn't been ascribed any meaning. Because words at the end of the day are just words and in themselves are dead. Nietzsche says that anything that we can put into words is dead, essentially. I'm kind of butchering the quote.
If you can put it into word, it's already dead.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you put things into word, it's dead. And so we've kind of lost the living spirit behind the words and the moving state of things and kind of the mysticism and the symbolism behind the words and our language. And that's why when we interact with God and we interact with each other, with God mediating it, we're essentially just interacting with the reality and the current state of things, because the current state of things has informed our perception of God. So we're just letting ourselves get beat by the systems at place. And if I can put any names to those systems, it would be the surgent, like the surgent left, like Marxism, just a lot of that kind of very humanistic approach on viewing things. And so how I kind of came to these connections is through probably, I would say, like three authors or speakers, which is Harold Bloom, who informs a lot of my imaginary and kind of the I don't know. Actually, I'm gonna skip that for now. So reality is kind of like the philosophers, right? It's the patterns. It's the material world that Aristotle talks about, and this is something that is really important to know. If we don't know our reality and why things work the way things work and how things work, then we're not going to get to know ourselves and our responses to that, and therefore we're not going to be able to like focus our hearts on God. Essentially, I feel bad because I'm just basically stating a bunch of conclusions without giving explanations why.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So if you can question me more on things, I would appreciate it. If something I'm saying is sounding off or a little wrong. So to dig into the reality point, if you make philosophy your worldview, if you interpret the world through philosophy, through the materium, it just becomes a religion. And it becomes a religion full of idols. And so when you hear Christians talk about, we make so many things are idols nowadays. Don't focus on making idols, focus on God. Mm-hmm. Like the God that they're worshiping is basically an idol. It's a very idealized and conformed and autistic version of God. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so, hold on, let me think.
So I guess how are you using this to counteract
that?
Yes.
So this is, for me, the way I'm using this kind of as a tool to know so that I can not know. And this is the process of negation that goes in the imaginary. So poetry is very heavy on symbolism and like imaginary states. Imaginary is more fiction. It's more novel. I would say symbolism fits more into the poetry state of things. Mm-hmm. And so what this does is when you don't just rely on your senses and on the set way of thinking and the material, and you start meditating on symbols more and start connecting it with more things, you basically start interacting with the heart of God more. Yes. And so to give a good symbol representation, I would say David, the Psalms, is a great one. The Psalms are just so heavily written with symbolism. The Bible in its entirety is so heavily written with symbolism, and we ignore all of it. Mm-hmm. Because we just want to fit everything into how it can be applied into this specific set of rules and world.
Into someone's like own ideology or theology.
Exactly.
Basically, you're trying to take things that you're trying to read into things too much to have it fit your own worldview.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of using that to kind of do what we're doing, which is to shape the framework through which to view the world.
Recognize the theory so that you can then negate it. So that's kind of poetry. Poetry, a lot of great poets, what they do, and this is, I'm taking from Harold Bloom here, who writes criticism about various authors in Western civilization, is that they get to know very personally the systems and the meanings of the words in those systems, and then they can reinvent that language. And in that space is where you find the divine. It's a creative mm-hmm. space. It's a space where you're not taking yourself too seriously and you're not taking the world too seriously. Mm-hmm. And in that kind of lighthearted, jest-like space, you can kind of interact with more of a divine will that goes outside your own. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to be just somebody who's interacting with the world in the way the world wants to you to interact with the world.
Yeah, and one thing I was talking with a friend of mine recently, and we weren't discussing this, but we were talking about some of my own issues with theology and how we in Western civilization basically like look at Christianity, and he took a very common view of things which we'll get into later.
Right.
Things about like original sin and
Right.
how the fall works, and basically stuff in Genesis.
Yeah.
And I was explaining my views on that to him, and he was saying, why not? What he basically said was, why if you don't believe what we generally believe as Christians here in the West, then you're leaning on your own understanding.
Right.
And so that's kind of why I wanted to do this, which is to say, I don't think it's leaning on your own understanding to try and figure this out.
Absolutely.
Or if it is, I mean, I don't think. See, it's so hard because it's like, what's the point of doing like anything if you don't?
Can I interject here?
Yeah.
So to add to that point, Jesus, if we look at Jesus, he teaches in parables and questions. This is a point I've been bringing up to a lot of people recently.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're not to lean on our own understanding, then why does Jesus ask us questions and lets us figure out him and things? And why does he hit us with parables?
Mm-hmm.
So something I wrote in my notes recently was that doubt takes place in the heart. And so the leaning on your own understanding and the doubt that Christians try to impart on other people for questioning is not the actual doubt. It's actually not the meaning of that word. Doubt takes place in the heart, and it takes place in your intentions on things. It takes place when you're kind of, to quote C.S. Lewis here, your North Star is figured in a different direction, right? But if your North Star is God, then your mind is naturally going to fill in the gaps and is going to search for that. So thinking is questioning. So questioning takes place in the mind, and doubt takes place in the heart. And so people can't really view this because they have no connection with their own body, because the body has lost all symbolic meaning. In the Psalms, and in I'll get to that in a second. In the Psalms and in the Psalms have an acrostic form where a lot of them where David uses the Hebrew alphabet, which have heavy symbolism in each of them, tied to different subjects. Like there's some like primordial concepts like life, death, change, etc. But they also have specific meanings to almost objects and exact material, which is like the hands, the feet, the heart, the mind, the crown, etc. And so when you kind of lose that kind of overall, like, you lose the ability to connect different symbols to different symbols, then you lose the ability to find God, in my opinion. Because all you're doing is interacting with the exact set of standards that people have laid out for you. And you're not actually thinking on your own, and your heart is not meditating on anything. So the leaning not on your... I would argue actually the opposite is following a strict denomination, like, for example, like Calvinism, or, I like to pick on Calvinism, it's funny. Or any other kind of denomination, is leaning on your own understanding because it's giving you understanding of God. It's giving you the exact way to think about God and how he acts in accordance with us, and that's just wrong, because God doesn't work like that.
That's my thing about arguing with Calvinists, because you get to the point eventually where they say, because like you kind of get them into like a little corner.
Right.
It depends on where it is with the whole the tulip stuff, but they'll always counter by saying, well, you can't guess the will of God, and I'm like, that's literally what we're doing. Let's not.
It comes to a thing where it's like, what are we even talking about right now?
Yeah.
Which is sophistry, which is like we're debating objects without having an actual subject.
Right. There's
no kind of connection to anything. Everything kind of just dies. Every word is just dead. So what was I going on about? So meditate. I think is a good way to think about things. You kind of need all these things. Let me just look at my notes real quick if you want to
For sure.
interject with anything.
I just want to clarify something. So the Sophia is the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, Sophia is the Holy Spirit.
Cool.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
wanted to. Okay.
So the reason, so to go into,
Does anything go into these?
I don't think there should be. People try to put things in there, but I don't like it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just kind of my heart. So I have a couple notes in here. Manifestation of an whoa. Actually, that's not. This is my notes on Lacan. Actually, so I'm going to answer your question instead about, so why have we reached the point where we are no longer able to think about symbols and meditate on symbols? Mm-hmm. And the reason goes back to history, and it goes back to kind of one of my opening statements, where our society and the way we think is met by the machine. So, and you're like, what is the machine? What does this even mean? So a good example of this are algorithms, right? So in a social media algorithm, the machine gets to know you, gets to know your thoughts, and then gives you stuff in response, and basically can just reprogram your brain. So the machine almost becomes our center. It becomes what all of our other thoughts stem out of. It becomes our object of desire.
What is the machine, essentially?
The machine is left brain. So it is the thing that calls for action. The machine is bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. The machine is capitalism. The machine is the rational way of viewing the world, the very rationalistic thinking. Mm-hmm. And how
actual machine.
How can I interpret God in order to subject myself onto the material plane and everything I'm interacting mm-hmm. with, like other people and other such things.
So, to add on to that, we're also not arguing for the peaceful savage, because that's a mistake.
Yeah, the noble savage. Yeah.
Sorry, the noble savage. That's that's just not really.
That's just not really a thing.
Yeah.
Right, and so what happens, to add on to the noble savage thing, is what happens when you take things out of context, is you come up with these terms and ideas that are, what your body has to do when you just purely subject it to reality, is your right brain is going to try to fill in the blanks, and is like, what can I imagine, what can I idealize, what can I dream of? And then you end up just dreaming things that are fundamentally untrue and harmful to the world. Mm-hmm. You end up dreaming of things that just sow chaos and discord into the world. And so a lot of our horizon and what we are looking to are just things that are just things. They're just objects. Everything is object. Mm-hmm. Which is funny, because nowadays we see truth as something that is subjective, like everybody has their own truth and etc., which to a certain degree is kind of true. We're all very personal, and we all have our own thing going on, and we all have our own relationship with God. But there is truth.
A little bit of spiral dynamics.
So there are things that are just things, right? There are things that are just true, essentially. And so, but the only way you can kind of view these things, and the only way you can kind of really interact with these things, is if you take into account, if you repurpose your heart to meditate on the divine and scripture and etc. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, all right, Isaiah, your framework's kind of making sense, or it's not making sense, because why if it's just a matter of meditating on the vine, why Jesus, why God? Mm-hmm. Well, my belief is that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light, right? Mm-hmm. And so this only means something to Christians. Other people are like, what are you talking about? But the reason I kind of come to this conclusion is because we all need to tap into these kind of archetypal forms that we've lost ever since, kind of, me and Matt were talking about this right before this, mm-hmm. About how basically the Romans kind of killed the gods.
Yeah.
And the gods in themselves, the pantheon, is kind of a weak concept, because it kind of defies the oneness of the creator.
Yeah.
Because I believe that we have a creator, And I'm not even going to argue that. We can argue that some other day when I have like a proper like dialectical opponent, like and we take away from some philosopher and try to argue against him. But we have a creator, and his design is immanent in our lives. So that's another kind of presupposition I'm throwing in there. And the thing is, we lose this. So the reason a lot of people argue against this is because they're so tapped into just reality and stuff. Because nothing makes sense if you're just like perceiving. If you're just looking at things and observing things, nothing makes any sense. It just doesn't. You're going to get to nothing because everything is kind of a loop. The reality is there to inform us of patterns that we can break so that we can kind of transcend.
You need context.
Yeah. I don't know if this is sounding too... I was going to try to not sound too mystical
Yeah, you're
this
going
one.
off the rails.
I'm going a little schizo.
No, but okay, so to go back a little bit, what I was saying to Isaiah before we started was basically, to me, mythology is really cool when it's very old, and then once you get to the Romans, it gets really boring.
It gets boring, yeah.
And then until you get to the Northern Europe, like Scandinavia and British Isles lore of like the early, like the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, and then it becomes mystic again and very old and kind of mossy and really wet.
Right.
It was cool. They got some cool stories in there.
They got some cool stories. And so actually to piggyback off of your stories thing, so what we have lost as a culture is kind of a objective mythos. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is a lot of cultures had kind of myths or pantheons or kind of religions that they could compare these kind of archetypal forms and these manifestations of God, they can cross-reference it to each other. And we don't have that. We've kind of, we've killed God. We've done all this stuff where it's like...
World War II.
We had World War II, and we just got controlled by the machine. And the machine doesn't want you to have God because it doesn't want you to be free. It wants you to be a part of it. It's kind of all-consuming. It kind of consumes everything. It just, And what I was saying earlier, it becomes kind of like a false god, an idol. And the worst part about it is it's an unconscious idol. It's kind of an idol just sitting in the back of your brain. It's literally a part of your brain. It's your left brain, just telling you that everything you need to do has to have a impact on reality, on this specific perception of reality and what other people can interact with. Mm-hmm. And you just lose God in that, in my opinion. And so it's like, so why was the mythos so important? And kind of like I think that myths are what connected people's consciousness together, and it's what made our relations with humans actually bearable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's called cultural literacy.
Cultural literacy.
Yes, and so that's basically the idea. This was my senior thesis. Back in high school was I forget what it was. It was talking about movies and our culture, and basically my thesis was our culture doesn't have basically what you were saying, like a common myth. Mm-hmm. Like we don't like Gen Z is in big trouble because we don't listen to the same music.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of do, and it's starting to kind of appear now. Like there are certain indie artists that you could say are definitely kind of like becoming sort of like our music. Mm-hmm. And I guess that takes time to go through, but it seems like, obviously we weren't alive back in like the 1900s, but it seems like our culture is so much more divided now. And one of the big things that I realized is that I think it's because we don't have anything to agree on anymore. Like you can't say, oh, hey, did you go see that new Fantastic Four movie that just came out? I thought it was pretty all right. And they'll say, there's a Fantastic Four movie that came out? Right. And that could just be ignorance, but also we have so much being thrown at us constantly by the machine and so much is being produced by that we lose our place in reality. Right. And there's no, basically if we do set up boundaries for us individually, then it excludes other people. Whereas in previous eras of history, the boundaries would include all the people who wanted or who were a part of that culture.
Yeah.
And so 2025.
2025, yeah, shout out
Yeah.
2025. So basically, the mythos is a kind of reinforming of collective conscious. I wrote this down right before this. Reinforming, reframing of collective conscious and unconscious archetypal forms. That's what it serves. That's its purpose in the world. And so we have to tap into mythos. So somebody who's goated, who kind of almost like got Christians united, is Tolkien through fiction. And because his characters and his world was so tapped in to a lot of like just universals and archetypes, and it wasn't just filled with the heavy depth of like philosophy or theology or any of the other
It wasn't C.S. Lewis.
It wasn't C.S. Lewis.
It wasn't the Chronicles of Narnia.
Right.
But it also wasn't Game of Thrones.
It wasn't Game of Thrones.
It was like
because Game of Thrones is essentially just the mythos of the modern world.
Yeah.
What Tolkien did for Christianity is what Game of Thrones did for modernity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because what Tolkien was trying to do was he was trying to give the British people, basically, he was trying to write the British people's Iliad, basically. He's saying this is going to be the myth that unites our culture.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is good thought. These are good thoughts. So where does myth fit into this? So myth is kind of a combination of the symbol and imaginary. Mostly, I would say the myth is more symbol, and no, the myth is actually more imaginary, and like the novel is more imaginary. And it's what kind of informs us of the living spirit. It's the spirit behind just the perceptible, and it's what's kind of getting us going, and it's what calls to our soul. The symbols, I believe, call to our heart. They call to our kind of intuition and the way that God designed us. It kind of like, once you start like, that's the thing, is like myth also helps people cross-reference symbols with each other. Is like everything kind of starts making sense.
Right.
But nothing makes sense anymore. And so that's kind of like what we're trying to do, is we're just like, all right, how do we make sense of the nonsensical, but not just make it make sense, if that makes sense? How many times did I say sense in that sentence? This many times. Like 6-7 times. So yeah, another thing, a meditation on the machine. Let's talk about brain rot.
Let's talk about that, and then I want to get into what we were talking about back in May about kind of how we should...
A restructuring of the creation myth?
Yeah, that.
Yeah. This is good. This is
very fun.
This is fun.
Well, let's get to the brain rot first.
Quick meditation on the machine and brain rot is... What brain rot effectively does is the same thing that the Big Brother in 1984 does in Newspeak. And it just combines a lot of terms and concepts into one concept so that it kills your thoughts. So, for example, I use the term like Riz here. So, what Riz does is it's a combination of like, so people are like, do you even know what Riz means? Yeah, charisma. It kind of stems from that, right? But what Riz does is kind of a combination of terms like flirting, terms like seduction, terms like desire, and it's packing them into one term that is very interactable. So when you see somebody doing something that provokes a kind of almost, I guess, like game between the masculine and feminine sensual undertone, you can just be like, that's Riz, and not think about it. So it's just a killer of thought. You're just thinking about things purely on a realistic scale, and you're not thinking about kind of the divine that those actions and those things stem from, and you're not tapping into the symbolic meanings behind those things.
Yeah.
All right, you want to go?
Okay.
Creation myth.
Bringing it back to about May of this year.
Right.
The camp that Isaiah and I started working at made a huge mistake and made us roommates.
Yeah.
Which forced us to be
Forced us to talk to each other.
Close to each other and talk to each other.
Which is always
And,
bad. It's always bad when people can talk to each other.
Never let people talk to each other because
Right.
they'll start to come up with good ideas.
Exactly.
Um,
Or at least original ideas, which I believe are inherently
so our ideas, I don't know if they're original, but they're kind of original for us, so we're going to call them
good. It's
original.
like, it's almost like what we were talking about mythos. It's like the application of that through the Bible. We're not reinventing the Bible.
Right.
We're just kind of meditating on the symbolism behind the creation more.
You could say this is the framework through which we're now viewing
Right.
kind of everything. Okay, so actually, I'm going to go before 2025 real quick. So,
Let's go back.
What happened to me back between 2023 and 24, which was my sophomore year of high school, and by high school, of course, I mean college, right? Sophomore going into junior year, and me and a really good friend of mine at my old school had the free will versus predestination argument. And he's like one of my best friends, of course. We play soccer all the time together. That being said, you will know your theology after arguing with a Calvinist.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And if you don't know your theology, which I realized I did know enough to argue with him, but I didn't know enough to prove it to myself, basically. So
Which is all theology.
Right, exactly.
Nobody actually proves anything to themselves. They're just arguing.
Right.
Which goes back to
exactly.
the
It's just a lot of noise.
Yeah, a lot of noise.
So I realized that, okay, so there was that. That was fall of my junior year that we kind of finished it. It was forced to be finished because then I transferred to Emerson to finish out my film degree. Emerson, the concept of God does not exist at Emerson, at least in the idea of like Zeus, basically. Like God in that sense does not exist.
Right.
Okay, so not only have I just come off a conversation or an argument about theology with a friend of mine, I now am at a place where all my beliefs are being constantly bombarded and challenged, and B, no one is actually pressing me on them, which is kind of an odd thing to say, but I was one of 2 Christians that I knew at the place. There were like 2 others that were kind of not really Christians, but anyways, it gave me a lot of time to start thinking about this idea, which was I did not know what was basically true or real anymore.
Right.
And so what happened was I decided that I needed to kind of hit pause on what I believed and say, okay, what is true about Christianity in the sense that what has been a part of the Western canon for so long that we take it as the truth and as the divine word of God, and what is actually divinely inspired by God, and what is true.
Yeah.
So the deconstruction of I don't know if it's the deconstruction of my faith, but it's the deconstruction of my belief.
It's a negation.
It's a negation.
Let's get poetical.
It's a negation of my belief. So I said, all right, everything is on the table, kind of what Descartes did. So obviously, I exist. And that's kind of like as far as I got with that. But
which is what Descartes did.
which is exactly what Descartes did. So start reading, start talking with another friend of mine. So besides Isaiah, I've met like 1.5 people who genuinely question their beliefs and think about it as hard as we do. And so yeah, okay. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So we meet in May and we start talking about stuff, and we started talking because I think I was sharing the story of the screenplay that I'm writing.
Yeah. Okay.
And so then you started sharing a story that you were thinking about, and somehow that got us to start talking about the Tower of Babel, I think.
Right, yeah. The Tower of Babel is like a core kind of if I don't reference it, I didn't reference it yet today.
Yeah.
But I probably in my mind I reference it a lot.
You're gonna hear it a lot more.
You're gonna hear it a
on this
lot
show.
more in the future. It's the I would have meditations on things, and it would go back to the Tower of Babel, because when you comprehend kind of language through the Tower of Babel and what it does and its implications, then you understand kind of why we're screwed the way we're screwed. Anyway, keep going.
Okay, so basically what we started doing was talking about our views on what is essentially the Christian mythology of basically the Bible up to Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
So that includes creation, fall, Cain and Abel,
Right.
Noah,
No.
and then kind of ends at the Tower of Babel
Yeah.
with the people being scattered. So, to clarify, this is coming from the point of view of someone who was on the free will side of the predestination versus free will argument. I was not raised a Calvinist. I was raised more of like kind of a skeptic, charismatic, I guess, in
It's
some
like,
ways. Evangelical.
Like
A little
what?
bit.
Like it's like a skeptic, charismatic, and like the opposite of that, like the skeptic traditionalist would be like
Yeah.
Jewish people.
And so the Christianity that I was raised on was my parents are very smart when it comes to what they believe to a certain extent. My family generally comes out of like the Brownsville revival back in the 90s. At least their beliefs in Christianity do. Okay, so let's start. We should kind of like not I don't know if it's like retelling the story of Genesis, but basically explain it the way that kind of tickles
Meditate
our
on the
fancy.
story of Genesis.
Yes, okay.
Let's do that.
So, I've been recently listening to the Maps of Meaning lectures by Jordan Peterson, which is beyond interesting, of course, and reading. Oh shoot, I should get it.
Show the people at home.
So the people.
Tell the people at home who Jordan Peterson is.
Masks of God by Joseph Campbell is 50% extremely boring and 50% like mind-blowingly cool.
Just like any book.
But like I've actually fallen asleep reading this book before.
That's crazy.
So, God creates the universe, whether that's in like 6 days, like the Christian fundamentalists claim, or gazillions of years, like
Because this is something
kind
that
of
matters,
everyone.
dude.
Because this is something that matters.
This is something that matters so much.
And it's just like if it's one way or the other, like you're just not one of the elect.
Right.
But,
And like Christians have gotten to the point where they know what doesn't matter anymore, and they've separated into primary, secondary, and tertiary beliefs. And it's like the fact that you even have that means you don't even know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Because it's like when viewing God, you should just have primary beliefs, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
There should
Yeah.
be no secondary or tertiary beliefs.
Yeah.
God is the most important thing. It's where we direct our hearts to. It's our North Star. So if our North Star isn't actually the divine, then we end up with stuff like secondary and tertiary beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's a system that they've made in place in order to feel comfortable about their disagreements, which they know deep down inside is not in line with the design of God, our design, and the way Jesus has instructed us to meditate on Scripture and on God. They feel the fact that you ever feel comfortable with disunity is crazy, because disunity is not God. You know what I mean?
Last summer I read.
It's taking
yeah.
the wisdom. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm on a little bit of a train.
Okay.
This is my last. This is the last boxcar of the train.
Yeah.
But the actually I forgot what I was saying, which is really cool. The
secondary and tertiary beliefs.
yeah. So the you know what? Let's just put a post-it note on
Okay.
it. We'll revisit it later. Like,
Last
go
summer.
off.
Last summer, I read Back to Methuselah by George Bernard Shaw. And in the first act of the play, it takes place in the Garden of Eden. And Adam and Eve, this is pre-fall. So they're just like kind of walking through the garden, and everything's fine until they come across a deer which has tripped over a root, stumbled, and broken its neck. It's dead.
Right.
So immediately my mind is like,
Right. Makes you think a little
just
bit.
like, what the heck is even that?
That. What question does that raise?
What question does that raise? That says, was physical death a thing before the fall?
Right.
The answer that we've kind of come to is yes.
Right. And so, do you mind if I expound on that?
Please.
So the reasoning behind why death would still be a physical thing is viewing God as a whole, viewing God as and his subsequent creation as a whole thing, and viewing dualistic things not in necessary polarities. So a lot of people think that dualism, like two things, right, that kind of like go against each other.
Yeah.
They're not actually opposite to each other. That's polarity, right? So they think that, yes, they kind of are opposite of each other, but that doesn't mean that they weren't designed together.
Dualism is more like the yin and yang.
Right,
thing.
exactly. Yeah. And that's my belief on life and death is it's more of a dualistic thing and less of a polarity thing, where it's like North and South Pole, it's like purely oppositional. Mm-hmm. Because if we view God as a divine whole being in himself and his creation as a subsequent form of that, then he created life and death together in one thing. And so kind of what that stems the question on like the little snake talking to Eve and talking about you're going to die, or like actually Eve says, if I eat of this fruit, I will die. So she knows the concept of death. And people interpret as literal, right? We're going back to the literal versus symbolic thing. Yeah. Is they're like, she's dead. She knows. So they're like, okay, so Eve knows this concept of death and then later dies a physical death. Therefore, the concept of death she had must have been a physical one. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Must have been like, she must have and therefore the thing that is the death that is going to come into the world is a physical death, but that's not true, right? The death that is coming into the world by proxy of that is the spiritual death. Because if you view life and death as kind of a thing that work in tandem in order with the creation of God, then you realize that life and death kind of are this mechanism in which God exhales and inhales life. It's a constant form of creation. And death is used to define life, right? Death has no meaning with life. Life has no meaning without that.
Yeah. So.
And God wouldn't create something absent of meaning. Mm-hmm. Everything that God creates, the Creator would have meaning in itself.
Yeah. So let me clarify something. So the argument is basically, so death exists, which means nature in itself has not really changed that much. I mean, physical nature. I take issue with natural evil and moral evil, the distinction that Protestants and Catholics bring up, because it relies on the assumption that something like earth-shattering, like switch the second they bit out of the apple.
Right.
I don't think that really makes sense. And so basically if there is no death before the fall, physical death, mind you, that means that I guess we're supposed to assume that means either people just didn't get hungry, or everyone's eating plants. Right. Which, if you have any sense, you know that's still killing something. Right. And so
death exists.
So either death exists or
it's a natural part
somehow God is like feeding them something, which also, I don't know. But
so the sin that branches out from that choice is the sin of fearing death, and it is fearing a natural part of God's creation. It is the sin that Eve makes, and by proxy Adam, is trying to escape the natural order of how God made things. And she does so by making kind of a weird decision by biting the fruit of the tree of good and evil, right?
Yeah,
Knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because as I said, I've been listening to the Maps of Meaning lectures, and Peterson is talking about how the eating of the fruit is the development of consciousness.
Yeah.
Because then they realize
Right.
that they're naked, so it's like,
Right.
oh, I'm now conscious of myself. I'm conscious of you. You understand. It's like you're like gaining levels in like the spiral dynamics chart, and then. Okay, so then, so basically, and then there's the question, if I go back, X thousands of years, like 10,000 years, and stand at the junction of the Tigris and the Euphrates and the other two rivers, am I going to see two humans biting into an apple and a snake hanging down from the tree?
Right.
Did that actually happen?
Right. But
is not the point.
Is not the point. Yeah.
What matters is the story.
Right, and
the
it's
story
the
is more
mythos.
true.
It's the mythos that current culture created in order to understand
What happened?
and God's divine plan.
Right.
And the God's divine
Yeah.
order.
And so I'm not saying that something didn't happen. Like something clearly went wrong.
There was an inciting incident.
There was an inciting incident, as there is with every story.
Right.
So something happened. I'm not denying that the fall happened. What I'm saying is, I don't know. I don't think there's any real way to tell if that actually is historically accurate, or if it's narratively accurate, which is more important at the end of the day anyways.
So the thing that people do, the reason that people flee the concept of death so much is because people are essentially doing the same sin. A lot of like Christian restructuring of theology is doing the same thing that Eve did, which is trying to understand and trying to gain knowledge of good and evil and trying to achieve a level of control over reality.
Yeah, and so why
through understanding it.
Yeah, so
which is philosophy kind of too.
It is.
Which is philosophy, theology, and that's why it's void without the North Star.
That's leaning on your own understanding.
That's leaning on your own understanding.
Once again, I think that's not what we're doing, because we're trying to figure out a way to look at that correctly.
Right.
In the context of
in a more complete sense.
In a more complete sense, and in the context of our own culture, but also understanding it in the context of cultures past.
Right, exactly.
And so, okay, so that's the fall. Did I miss anything with the fall?
No, I think that's
I think that's mostly what we covered.
Those are kind of the main conclusions we came from.
We haven't really gotten to talking about the flood yet, but I think I was actually talking with a friend of mine, and I was like, because we were talking about kind of this, and
right.
I was like, I was like, I think it's really funny that people say the flood didn't happen when literally like every culture and civilization ever is like, yeah, that happened. And it's like, are you gonna tell me that every ancient culture is wrong?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so anyways,
because if you look at it in a complete sense, we would be more wrong than anybody else, because
right.
we are not we don't have that collective consciousness that other people have.
Right.
Can I
Please.
I wrote something down earlier when I was listening to a theory on Lacan that has nothing to do with Lacan, but it's just something I was thinking of when I was reading it.
Okay, cool. Can we have like 10 minutes? Or do we have to go now?
I can give you guys like 5 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, thank you.
All right, and so something I wrote down is Jesus's teachings of estrangement of the world is an act of rebellion towards the material to confide in the heart and to confide in him. Yeah. Because I think it turned off anyway.
All right.
All right, so let's wrap this up.
Okay. So briefly, I just want to. Okay, so I guess we'll start the next episode by going over the Tower of Babel. We're getting kicked out of where we are right now.
Yeah.
But the Tower of Babel, to give you a little teaser, the Tower of Babel is kind of the fulcrum of everything we're kind of talking about, and what we're really talking about. Everything we're going to talk about in the future kind of makes sense based on the context of what we've kind of figured out with the Tower of Babel. which in like one brief monologue is.
So, the Tower of Babel was kind of the symbolistic apex that I came to when meditating on what exactly was wrong with the current state of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a form of mistranslation that is not natural.
It's the inception of actual miscommunication.
Of actual miscommunication and our inability to actually speak each other's languages.
Yes.
So we each, in our own minds, form these kind of languages and these definitions and these meanings, which is good, which is life.
Even if even if you're speaking English, I'm speaking
Right.
English, there is a barrier, which
Right.
is how do I get my idea from in my head
Right.
to into your head?
And that's kind of, I think, where a form of collective consciousness and unity fell off.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, we're kind of all doing our own thing, which is why we get so many mistranslations throughout, like philosophy and other things, which is fine, because God was good because He still kind of keeps that ember of life present in each of us, and He inhabits each of us, but we cannot really come to a full picture of God with other people and their words.
Cool.
And so that's why you are encouraged, dear viewer at home, to meditate and to think and to purify yourself, purify your minds. Get away from the machine, dude.
That's right.
Like, most people know this. Most people don't want to be doing this. Most people don't want to be doom scrolling. And you know it deep down. And so, but then it's like, all right, this thing that's giving me meaning, this definition, this God that's giving me meaning is absent from my life. What do I replace it with? Find a North Star, dude. Find God.
Yeah. So next episode we'll start with going more in depth with the Tower of Babel, and I also kind of want to talk about Gnosticism too, 'cause I think that's really cool.
I want to talk about Gnosticism.
Specifically
too.
the stuff with like the inner spark and
Right.
dualism
Right.
and all that, because I think that's very interesting.
Gnosticism low-key fits into the circle if you think about it, because it's like you could have one of these be mysticism, one of these be Gnosticism, and one of these be like, I guess, philosophy or religion or theology. So anyway,
Peace.
peace out, Girl Scout.